Hi, I'm Tom Stevenson and welcome to MS Project the Course. I've set up a series of videos that will help walk you through MS Project. We start at the very beginning and we teach you all the fundamentals. Now if you're a little bit more advanced, you might want to jump in on any of the particular videos by topic. Today, which is video 4, we're going to be just talking about maneuvering between the different screens. I'll give a little bit of recap on some of the things that we've done in the previous videos before we start getting into a little bit more technically challenging things like adding resources and updating and recovering schedules. I think at this stage it's a pretty good idea to just get yourself oriented on the different screens and kind of where we're headed in the course, so to speak. Alright, so you can download this start point file. I have a link in the description. You can go to Google Drive and download it and follow along if you like. I've had a lot of feedback from people in different sections that I've taught that they'd like to download the file. So here it is. You can download it, or you can just simply follow along, whatever you want. And before we start, please click subscribe. It helps out the channel, helps us build the community. I'm a professor of construction management, and so my sort of direction on this tends to be from a construction perspective, but how you use the tool can come from any perspective. So we've got here a work breakdown structure developed. I've kind of made it a little bit colorful so you could actually see the different levels in the work breakdown structure. We did that a couple of videos ago. And a work breakdown structure simply means you can roll things up, you can organize components of your project so that it's easy to follow. You've got the overall project, and here you've got lower levels. You can go to the View tab. You can open them all up fairly quickly by going to Outline and say All Subtasks, and then everything should open. I can see here that this is the indicator column, and this is very helpful. I'm currently in the actual entry screen. So when I just quickly click there on that square box, I call it the square icon box, it selects everything. If I right click, I can see a bunch of the most common tables that are used, and we'll quickly go through some of them today. And that's a quick way to maneuver between different screens, to access different screens. When you're new to MS Project, it's like a database program, and half the battle is trying to figure out what screen am I in, what screen do I want to be in, what do I want to do. So we slowly integrate this into the course here so that you get a good understanding of what it is. We've used the entry screen up till now quite a lot because that's where we could create the overall project plan. And that's why it's called the entry screen. In the project plan, we can enter our tasks, our durations, we can connect predecessors, what comes before, what comes after, quite easily in this screen. And everything is oriented like a database by numbers. So things will relate by row numbers. And when you see a predecessor number here, number 9, it means temporary washrooms is a predecessor to install metal studs. We try not to put predecessors or successors onto summary tasks. Best practice, link activities to activities. Have all of your activities in basically what we call auto schedule. Don't have them in manual schedule. Manual schedule puts this, but it doesn't automatically schedule things, and it'll give you different dates if you're not careful. Make sure everything is always auto schedule, and you can do that by changing it here or making sure that all new tasks are auto scheduled. So if I slide to the left here, I can also switch, and you'll see if I slide all the way to the left and I right click, you can see there's a series of sheets. They'll call some of them sheets, they'll just have names for some of them are tables. Microsoft doesn't really distinguish exactly what a sheet is from a table, so I just look at it that it's areas either that it's got some sort of diagram that we can look at, or it is indeed like a table. So we'll take a look at some of these in a second here. Up here, this is the timeliner where you can put things or place things up on the timeliner that you might want to see. You can adjust the overall project by pulling left to right here, and it kind of scales things different ways here. A lot of people will like to put up, if you want to put an activity like a milestone up there, you can right-click on it and you can say Add to Timeline, and it'll place it up onto the timeline. So if there's anything you kind of want to see as you're doing, you can place it on the timeline. Or later in the course, when I get into filtering and sorting and all that fun stuff, we can like place all our milestones up on there, and that makes it kind of nice to be able to see it. If I want to undo something, of course, I can do Control-Z, and that'll undo that and take it off the timeline. Or there's those undo icons over here that I could also do, but Control-Z is a nice little shortcut for that. And as I said, we have the square icon box here. So if I click on it and I right-click, and see there's other screens. We're in the entry. There's the cost screen. Cost is when we add resources, which we'll do in an upcoming class, where we add resources and we add costs, and it'll calculate and add the costs here, and we can see how much they're summing up to. And so if we have like a summary task, we'll be able to see the total of the costs. And this baseline here, well, if you're new to scheduling software, all scheduling software does is you have a plan, and then once you have that plan, then you start doing the project. So the plan, the original plan, is what we call the baseline. And that's what MS Project takes a snapshot of it, and it remembers things like cost. It remembers things like dates and durations. And when those change, you can see how much they changed by. And so you can see the variance in time, you can see the variance in cost, which is very important if you're tracking a project. So whenever you see baseline and variance, that's got to do with getting the plan together, and then if you're seeing variances, now you're executing on the plan, you're seeing what the differences are. And that'll come more intuitively as we jump into the course further and further. The cost is a fundamental screen if you've applied cost to your schedules. If you haven't, it doesn't really mean too much to us. Next screen here is that I'll look at, I'll skip the hyperlink one, schedule. If I skip ones, it's just that they're not too important for now, at least. So the schedule one I showed in an earlier video, and this is where we can see the all-important float or slack, right? We can see which activities have float and which activities have slack. We can follow that along on our schedule and see what exactly is going on with that. Now we can see that we've got certain activities have like one day of slack, whereas we can see other activities have zero float. So if we've got zero float, that means that we have no flexibility in that activity. So we have no flexibility in that activity. If we have 2 days, we have 2 days of flexibility. We have 15 days, we have 15 days of flexibility. That's how long before this becomes critical. So in this screen, we can see exactly what kind of float or flexibility that we have in the schedule. I'm going to slide over, actually I'm going to click on the square icon. Tracking screen. This is where we put in actual starts and actual finish to the project. So this is where we put in our actual start date and our actual finish. So when we're updating the schedule, we come here. So that will allow us to do that. We got to pay attention to the names on the columns, because that'll be very helpful for us when we get to that stage. Because one of the issues that new users have is they get confused, because there's like start, there's finish, there's baseline start, there's baseline finish, there's actual start, there's actual finish, there's late start, there's late finish. But when you think about it, this is pretty clear. Actual means you're actually doing the work. And so if you mark something, for example, as being 100% complete, it means it's done. And it basically means that that is completed, right? So that would mean that that's completed. Now that's a milestone, so it doesn't show you too much. But if you put 100% here, then it'll draw a bar through it. So then that just shows you, well, that activity there is completed. I can zero that out again, just put a 0, and that'll zero it out. I haven't put a baseline, so it wouldn't show any variance or anything on this particular practice schedule here. All right, so now I'm going to slide over here again, and another screen that's useful. Well, usage. right? Usage gets into just sort of hours of work, and we'll get into that when we get into resources. So it just sort of highlights hours of work that we've assigned to particular activities. It can be useful. It may not be useful if we're not, adding costs and not tracking individual hours like people, because in construction sometimes we have a subcontractor and we may not be tracking their actual hours. So it just depends on that, but it can be important. Variance is very important because that's going to tell us, are we ahead or are we behind schedule? So if we've set the baseline, this one's not, then it would copy these dates and paste them there, copy these dates and paste them there. So in this screen, we can then track when we update and change things, how much changed, how many days changed. Very, very, very helpful. One of the fundamental screens for scheduling is the variance screen. Work is again getting into more, now you're getting into really tracking hours and activities again. And again, that may be very important or it may not, depends to the level of detail that you're following that along. I'm going to slide to the left over here where it says Gantt chart. And there's a few screens here I'll just go through. So over here it says calendar. Calendar shows you things in a calendar view. So you can kind of see by the month what's going on. You can see which activities are happening. You can customize it. I'll show you more of this in another class, but I could show 6 weeks on the one screen if I wanted to. So calendar view is really kind of cool if you're like a site super and your trade doesn't really like looking at a Gantt chart because they don't know what they're looking at, but you show them this. It can be helpful because you can really even filter this to just show a particular trade's work coming up in the next month or next week, 6 weeks, and have a discussion with them, which is really helpful if you've got the data in place, right? So calendar is really helpful for those types of things. Network diagram we've discussed already. We looked at that when we did the critical path, and we sort of joined everything together in this schedule. All right, and so in this particular schedule, we can see the actual linkages and the schedule logic, and what's in red is the critical activities. I have a suspicion that this isn't showing critical over here because that there is a special calendar, I think that's assigned to one of the trades. Let's actually just take a look at that. So it's good worth noting some of these little quirky things that go on that kind of bug people sometimes, including myself. I'm going to go to the entry screen. I see this rough in plumbing here, and they've got a special calendar. I showed you how to do a special calendar in one of the previous classes. One of the things that's not fun about special calendars, if that task becomes critical, it makes the critical path before it disappear. I probably mentioned that in the last video, but just in case I didn't, I'll say it now. I could, like, if this wasn't critical, let's see, that shortens out. See how now it comes back? Well, that's because now this isn't impacting that. When something like a special calendar or a constraint is impacting the schedule, Microsoft Project is kind of telling you, it's not running perfectly critical path. We've got certain constraints or limitations. For example, if the plumber doesn't work Fridays, that's flagging it for you. That's sort of making that stand out. So, you might, and that's why it showed like 1 day, I think, if I go back here to the variance screen, to the schedule screen, it showed 1 day here, right? Well, that was talking about that Friday that the plumbers didn't work, right? I'm going to go back here and I'm going to go to the entry screen. I'm going to get rid of this for now because I think it'd be better for you on the learning stage right now to just look at it or try it without that. Actually, if you're following along, I'll go slower. I just double clicked on rough in plumbing, right? I'm going to click on calendar. It says plumbing calendar, subcontractor. I'm going to say none. All right, so I double clicked. I'm in the advanced tab here. I'm going to say none. When I say none, it actually means the plumber is following. If I go to project information, the standard calendar, because that's what it says here. I could have the whole project follow the plumbing contractor, but I don't want that. Standard. So, and if you're not sure what I'm talking about with calendars, watched the previous video, I'll leave links in the description below so that you can solidify that area. All right, so we're flipping screens. We're getting used to what we're looking at. We kind of looked over here at cost, entry, schedule, tracking, usage, variance, and work. There's even more tables. I won't get into them right now. If I slide to the left here and I right click, and so we've got network diagram. I won't get into these ones too much here. We'll get into them later. We did look at these three here. Oops, we went and did that. So we looked at those three. I'm going to take a jump down here to the tracking Gantt. Tracking Gantt's fundamentally important too. Now in this case, it only shows one bar, but if I set a baseline, I can go here, set baseline, get into that in another class too, but for the entire project, you'll see two bars. The bottom bar represents the plan. Remember I said we're planning stuff? The top bar represents what's changed, or maybe nothing's changed. But look, if I change that to 21, now it shows a day, like everything moved a day. I can see it. I can really understand what's going on. And remember the variance screen that I said? Just getting used to switching screens right now. Right click, variance. Now we can see there's a variance of 2 days, right? We can see we started this on time, we started this on time, and this took 2 days longer. So we can very quickly see what is going on. I'm going to slip back to the entry screen. And right now, because I just wanted to show you screens here, I'm going to take out that baseline that I set, because I really don't want to have it in this file that I'm going to have you use for the next class that we do. So I'm going to clear the baseline, clear baseline entire project, and now we're back to where we were more or less. It's not memorizing anything that was there. All right, this has changed from 20 to 22, so let's change that back to 20. There we are. Now we're good. All right, I'll just click save here. Okay, so we've been maneuvering around. I got rid of that little constraint over there. I'm going to slide to the left, and we looked at the tracking Gantt. Now I'm going to look at the resource sheet first. Resource sheet is where we'll be going in the next class, and we'll be talking about adding resources, adding costs, and applying resources to the schedule. So this is a very, very important table that we actually populate. Now, you might not add costs if you're not doing a cost-loaded schedule. You might just want to add resources, but you still want to add resources and assign them so you know who's responsible for which activity. So this is where you would put, people's names or trade partners' names, companies' names, vendors' names, that sort of thing. So you could assign them and then hold accountabilities. So I'm going to slide to the left again. Now these other ones here, like resource usage, resource graph, resource form, they all have to do with the resource sheet. They're not going to tell us too much right now until we add resources, so I won't really get into them either from that perspective. Once we add resources, then we'll be able to see stuff on those particular sheets. I am going to just go down to the very bottom here, and it says view bar. On view bar, you'll see this toolbar that comes up. This toolbar is exactly the same when I right click. It has an icon for each one of these. So if you prefer to see icons and click on icons, you could just put the view bar there, and then you could select what you want, like network diagram, Gantt chart. This little down arrow you could click on, that will just allow it to go further down, but then you're going to click up that way and pick, if I want to go back to the Gantt chart, I go there, and it'll bring me back up to the Gantt chart. Me, because I'm teaching these classes, it takes up a bit of real estate for me, so I usually don't use the view bar. That's up to you whether you like that. And that is the two main ways and screens that we have to maneuver ourselves and access in MS Project. Main ones: cost, entry, tracking, variance. Maybe work and usage might be important as well. And over here, main ones: calendar, Gantt chart, network diagram, tracking Gantt for sure, and the resource sheet. And when you get into populating the resource sheet, then resource usage, resource graph can become very useful, as well as task usage. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the screens and why they're there. They communicate to each other, and that's why it's like a database program. All right, so that's it for this session. If you enjoyed this session, please click subscribe and notifications. Check out my playlists. I've got a lot of construction-related videos as well as much more MS project videos. But this one I'm following along, and I'm trying to leave you links to download files that you can follow along too. I'm Tom Stevenson, wishing you a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.